Welcome everyone to Deep Drinks Podcast, the deepest podcast on the internet in the entire world. This is an amazing place. Today we're discussing Jesus' mythicism. Was Jesus a historical figure, or was he a mythological figure, or something in between? My guest today is Elliot Saxon, who's a content creator behind Brave New History, which focuses on early Christian history, Gnosticism, Islam, and the formation of these ideas. We'll look at mythicism, as I just mentioned, and discuss whether or not Jesus is mythological or historical. Welcome, my guest, Elliot Saxon.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
So this is a controversial subject, but it shouldn't be. But there's definitely two camps on the internet. And when I asked the audience, it seems to be quite split down the middle of the Deep Drinks audience. So before we jump into it, let's talk about what we're drinking. What are we drinking today?
I'm drinking black coffee with ice.
Yeah.
You drinking hot coffee?
Well, I'm drinking hot coffee, but mine is just a coffee with soy milk. So
okay, good deal.
Yeah, it's my favorite type of coffee. Besides maybe iced coffee, but yeah, it's good. It's good stuff. So you have a channel called Brave New History. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, so it's history of religion. A lot of it is oh yeah, there it is right there. So there we see Gnostic Quran. I collaborate with him a lot. Freemasonry here and there. And there's Dr. Litwa right there. We're actually talking about, we're actually talking about another interview coming up, which would be pretty
cool.
sweet. But yeah, Christian origins, a lot about speculating into the origins of Islam and possible Gnostic origins of it, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's wild to me. To think that there could be Gnostic origins to Islam. I mean, I'm getting blown away by the Gnostic origins of Christianity. So,
Well, yeah, I mean, that's one idea, is Gnostic origins. But then again, like as Litwa says, like Gnosticism is such a slippery term that hey there, River City Film.
His River City Films is one of the members, so I always try to make sure I bring up their members' comments. Thank you, guys. If you do want to become a member, just click the join button. It really helps out this channel. I do want to quickly mention as well that this isn't just a regular old stream. This is a exciting stream because it's kind of the preface to something that I've been wanting to do for a long time, and it's going to be a new thing on Deep Drinks. You yourself and Godless Engineer will be doing the first Deep Drinks debate. So we're going to be launching that next week, is it? So this is going to be super exciting. So I'm going to share the screen right now. Here's Deep Drinks, and I'm about to press the save button. And now we'll reload, and we should see it pop up. Hopefully. Boom! We have... Did Jesus exist historically? So we've had Godless Engineer John Gleason on the channel before to talk about this very subject, and so he gave a very strong position for mythicism. So if you're interested in that, go check out that episode. And today you come down on the historical side of things, so we'll be discussing that, and then we'll bring it all together for a Deep Drinks debate. So this will be a really exciting one. So make sure you subscribe, smash that like button. It helps the algorithm. And yeah, very excited. Very, very excited.
Yeah, and hopefully tonight I'll share my mythicist finishing move here, to which there's no defense, so it doesn't matter if he knows what it is, because there's no defense to it. It's a slam dunk. So I'll turn his heart live on air, warm his heart to historicity.
Cool. So I thought a good place to start is we could actually do a steelman of the historical Jesus as history, and then we could attack that position, and then we could do a steelman of Jesus as mythological, and then we could attack that position. And so I was hoping we could do a bit of both. Yeah, what do you think? Is that a good idea?
No, yeah, for sure. And just as I was, thinking about, doing a debate with historicist with mythicist, it would be funny if you have certain phrases that would set off. Now you have to take a drink, right? So the historicist appeals to lost writings, to a lost sayings tradition. Take a drink, right?
Yeah.
If mythicist accuses historicists of being ad hoc, then take a drink. But
yeah, I'm still trying to work out the gimmick of that, but it would be pretty funny to like you get a little shot every time the audience like says great point or something, and like it's like a tag team. I don't know, but can't get too messy, obviously. But yeah, I'm thinking of some ideas. If anyone has any ideas, post them in the comments down below. But so Jesus as history. So give us the best Steelman version of Jesus as a historical, living, breathing person. Give us the Steelman of that from your perspective.
Yeah. So I would say the best argument for historicity is that it's just the simplest answer, that there was a real guy who started it. So when you're talking about, other things like, well, there's a lot of themes from mystery cults, and they're bringing traditions together. There's syncretism, which is true, but I think the simplest explanation is there was a real guy that was at the core of it. I think that's the best argument for historicity. It's nice and simple. And then mythicists will be howling, I'm sure, in the audience when I say this, but there is independent attestation for Jesus, multiple independent sources. So the Didache, there's the Didache, which means the teaching, and it's like an instruction manual. Some people consider it canon. Early on, short book, and it's very different from what we see in the Gospels and the Pauline epistles. And so I would say that's independent, because it seems non-Pauline, that there's a separate tradition it's pulling from, right? We have Josephus. A lot of people say, well, he's not independent, but he's darn close, right? And there's so much parallel. Maybe somebody's taking from the other, which is a way to counter that. But we have Josephus. Clearly, we have. I mean, I think every mythicist will say that the authentic Pauline epistles are legit, and that describes a real Jesus. I mean, there's certain, like, meeting him one day, we'll meet him up in the sky. That seems a little bit out there, right? But yeah, there are several verses that talk about a historical Jesus.
Captain Call just became a member, I believe. Thank you so much, Captain Call. I really appreciate it. Yeah, your support. Yeah, so to me, it's like we have the Pauline letters, and they're the first things that we have, right? I'm gonna give you the 2-year-old's like kind of explain it to me like I'm 2. I'm gonna try and restate it. So we have the Pauline letters, the letters written by Paul to the churches, and then after that, so they were written first, and then after that we have the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, which retell the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. I can see the desire for someone to say it's myth, which is, to me, is the thing that makes me a bit what's the word, weary. Like I'm a bit like, oh, this would be really nice for for atheists and skeptics to say it's all myth. It'd be really nice for them because it solves a lot of like issues. And Godless Engineer and I got into that back and forth, and we very much disagreed, but we're still friends and everything's good. But so Yeah, so to me, we got the Gospels. So do you think the Gospels are historically reliable, even though they mention things like miracles and resurrections? And like, how do you get around that?
Yeah, you really can't. They're not terribly historical. Like, you wouldn't rely on them independently as history. So, like, the parts that are attested to in Josephus, right, that he was crucified, um, he was ordered to die by Pontius Pilate, right? Those are historical, but yeah, it's hard to get history out of the Gospels. You could say that things in common with all four might be more likely to be historical, but then they probably just borrowed all of it from. They all just kept in the Mark and stuff, right? So
yeah, but well, John doesn't use Mark, does he?
Well, that's a matter of debate if John knows Mark at all.
Yeah,
I'm inclined to say yes but it's debatable.
Meredith has brought up a good point. Sounds like our eyewitness testimony. It must be true. Yes, just like every other religion.
Yeah, absolutely.
If it's written down, it must be true. Yeah. So it is interesting though, because you have these. You're saying that the Gospels can't be relied on for history. They're the main source that we use to kind of talk about what Jesus lived and did in his life, and that to me causes a bit of a problem because, and I'm just trying to play devil's advocate here.
Yeah.
How do we rectify that? Like where are you getting the historicity of Jesus from, if not from the Gospels?
Well, yeah, so that is a good point that I'm kind of maybe sympathetic to the mythicist position in that regard, because it's like, well, he didn't walk on water. There's no like miraculous catch of fish, right? Though, so what I would say, in addition to other sources, right? Josephus among them. Like if it's attested to in Josephus, it's pretty solid. But the authentic Pauline epistles. So even in like when we're mythicists appealing to the authentic Pauline epistles to try to say, well, that verse is interpolated and probably something, there's some redactions here, right? That he's still talking about a church that already exists. He's late to the game in it, right? There's Peter and James and John that are head of the church. So to me, like when we're doing a debate on mythicism versus historicism, it's like, yeah, there we go. Like the mythicist has created like a ninja warrior course that they want you to go through and say, what about this? And what about this? And what about this that Paul says, right? And what about what is it? First Clement and the Ascension of Isaiah. But it doesn't matter because Paul attests to a pre-Pauline church. And there's nothing about them getting visions and relying solely on visions, right? So I think it's kind of, that's the end of the story, right? Historical, but by his account, right? But then I mean, there's the verses that are contested by mythicists, right? So there's one that it sounds bad, so it's like kind of where a lot of anti-Semitism comes from, but the Jews killed Jesus just like the prophets, right? So Paul says that in First Thessalonians. And mythicists have to say that's not legit, right? Because at least on the historicity of Jesus, he's crucified in like another realm, right? Like another heaven, right? So kind of to your question, yeah, I mean, the Gospels, I mean, it's kind of everybody's on their own in terms of how to get history from it. But we can look at Josephus, for example. Like, there's a lot of other people that are cited, but he's early, and then the Pauline epistles.
It
Yeah.
is so if you could like sum up like the best piece of evidence is that's just the most easiest explanation, right? Occam's razor. What is if you could give like another two pieces of like evidence that you would say really solidify it, what would be the next two best pieces of evidence that solidify a historical Jesus?
Yeah, so let's see.
And I know that I'm giving Godless Engineer just amazing points to prepare and attack you on. So, but you know, it'll be a fun debate. But
yeah, I mean, I guess there's one like a critical there's an idea in biblical criticism that if somebody says something that's a bit off and original, right? So there's certain sayings which the mythicists are not, they don't like the sayings traditions thing because among other things, it kind of like it's game over at that point if it's true, so they have to be against it. But there's the millstone saying where it's better for someone to like have a millstone hung on their neck and thrown into the water. That's attested to in First Clement, which interestingly on the historicity of Jesus they say is early, which to me is plausible. And so there's a sayings tradition, and then there's Q that that has to be early, perhaps earlier than Paul. So what they all share in common, like, hit the like button, everybody. But yeah, the sayings tradition, I would say.
I'm popping up messages, but I am listening at the same time.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you say Q?
Yeah, or sayings traditions generally that they're like, so the mythicist position would say that everything or a lot of things are old, which they are Old Testament, and they put it in the mouth of Jesus or put actions that he's doing, have Jesus doing them. But there's the millstone saying there's not really anything like that in the Old Testament, and it just appears out of nowhere, right? And it's early.
So is the concept that then that leads credence to a historical Jesus because it's put on the mouth of Jesus?
Essentially, yeah. That it's an unusual thing to say. We don't have anybody saying it before he does or before it's put into his mouth. So it kind of makes you think maybe at least there's an early tradition that's associated with him. Right? So maybe it's not like the Gospels or Acts where that tradition kind of comes up later, that there's a lot of time in between for different traditions to kind of blend together.
So we have Godless Engineer in the chat, writing down notes, I'm sure, to for the debate that's coming up, which is going. This I'm so excited to start doing debates on this channel. It's going to be awesome. So steel manning the historical account of Jesus is it's the easiest explanation. We've got specific sayings that are attributed to Jesus that we just don't know where they've come from, kind of thing. And is there anything else that's like a standout? Like, I mean, you mentioned Josephus. Is that good evidence for a historical Jesus?
Yeah.
Okay. Why is that? I don't know much about Josephus.
So he was a Jewish priest or rabbi, I guess you could say. He was commissioned by Rome to write history. And so you would think that his testimony would be a little bit hostile since he's not a Christian. And yeah, we get a lot of history from him. I mean, it's generally reliable. There's certain certain things that we kind of scratch our head about, but yeah, it's generally legit as far as.
Okay. So if we were to then attack, so we've moved from the steelman now to the attacking of Jesus as a historical figure. What would you say if you had to attack the position of a historical Jesus, not necessarily giving credence to a minimal mythicist position or mythological position? Well, I guess it would be technically, but let's just say you're just attacking the idea that Jesus historically existed. What would you say?
Yeah, so being on the mythicist side is just a little bit more fun because it's like you can just kind of make up like, I mean, that sounds bad, but like just like poking holes in the whole thing. You can be like, well, where's the coinage? He should have coins printed of him. He didn't write a text himself. The yeah, go ahead.
But how would we I guess attack the idea that Jesus is historical, not moving on to Jesus the Jesus myth theory yet, but just Jesus, like, how do we attack that position? Like, what would be what would we have to discover to be true or untrue in order for us to question the historicity of Jesus?
Well, yeah, so I think lack of evidence where maybe some might expect it. So like Gospel of Jesus, for example, or coinage. I mean, maybe we want to expect coins. I know, like, it's been brought up previously that you have hostile attestation. So like somebody going off on Jesus, saying how he's dumb and terrible, he's a charlatan, right? So if you have something like that, that would be good, but we don't see anything like that, right? So we don't have like the transcript of the Sanhedrin that sentenced him to, or allegedly had something to do with his death.
So would that be the best way to like attack the position? Like, is there anything else we can use to like attack the historicity of Jesus? Like, to me, when I think of like, I am currently a Jesus historicist. I don't know what that really means, and that's mainly because, and this is the same thing I brought up with GE when I was on his channel. It's because I haven't looked into it enough. It's not something I'm super interested in, but I'm also a little bit interested. But I tend to just point to consensus scholarship, and there's definitely some problems with that. GE pointed that out. People like Mike Lacona like losing jobs because they they disagree with the statement of faith or something. So yeah, I definitely see that, but just as a default for me, I usually try to point to consensus scholarship if I don't know enough about the area. And this is why it's exciting to have people like yourself on and GE on to come and to debate this subject, because maybe I will find enough information to sway my opinion. So when it comes to Jesus as history, myself, if I was to try and steelman, like, attack the position of of Jesus being historical, I would say things like, it just seems convenient that there are all these like apocalyptic preachers of the time. It just seems like I could imagine that the stories of all these apocalyptic preachers running around get kind of mashed together into one, and then the surviving kind of cults out of all of these kind of groups kind of, I mean, you've got like, I just look at like society today and I see like, you've got like Hillsong, right? And Hillsong's a mega church, huge, all over the world, like crazy, right? And then out of Hillsong came, well, not necessarily out of Hillsong, but like there's a new groups like Bethel that kind of came out of that era, which are like trying to be a bit more spiritual, and then Hillsong kind of attaches its roots back to AOG, Assemblies of God Pentecostal Church, and Assemblies of God Pentecostal Church come back from the Pentecostal movements. And so like you can draw it all back, and like there's millions of little churches everywhere around, but like eventually people just go to the one that's the best. And maybe that's where Jesus came from. Maybe the idea of Jesus is the bunch of apocalyptic preachers there's stories about them written, you know, healing people and things like that, and it all just gets mashed together. That's how I would probably attack the Jesus history position myself. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, so kind of like a lot of people do, it's a little bit of a scale, right? So that the Jesus we see, like the miracle walking on water, right? Most people really don't necessarily believe that happened, right? But then purely made up, right, is on the other side of things, right? There was never a person named Jesus that actually lived, right? That's the other end. So
Yeah.
I mean, as far as syncretism, which is kind of mashing things together, that certainly took place. There were those apocalyptic preachers, which, I mean, when times are crazy, right, the crazies come out, right? And they're talking about the end of the world, which a lot of people are drawn to that concept of Jesus, which I don't know, it could be. And are we conflating multiple, in like the legendary Jesus? Are we conflating multiple people together? It could be, right?
Yeah.
Where I know, like, for example, in the Gospel of John, there's the miraculous draught of fish, of the 153 fish, if you remember that. And they count the fish, there's 153. Pythagoras did a strikingly similar miracle before Jesus did that in
Really?
John, right? So they're kind of saying, yeah. So, and then 153 is the number of the fish, right? Within ancient, because, I mean, I don't want to bore everybody, but we have, like, we're forming a cross, right? So you bring in two circles, right? The Vesica Piscis, right? And then so it'll be lengthwise and widthwise that it'll kind of form a cross, right? And then it'll be, I believe, 265. It's a close approximation. It's not. It doesn't form like a real number, right? And then 153 the other way, right? So for that reason, it was said to be the number of the fish, 153. And then in Pythagoras's version, they don't say what the number is, but he says, if I guess the number, will you let them go? No, will you give them to me? And then he guesses the number, and then they say, well, what do you want us to do with the fish? And he says, put them back. And they all survive. And that's the miracle.
Okay.
So, I mean, just like he's being equated with Moses, right? So like the walking on water, Jesus kind of does it better, right? He's walking on the water. Yeah, we are doing that. There's a lot of, syncretism going on. But yeah, I mean, wanting to do it better, right? Like we have mimesis, right? With appealing to the Bacchae, right? Like, so with Paul, he's kind of like, oh, you like, because Paul is everybody to everyone to try to convert people, right? And he's like, oh, you like the Bacchae? Well, you'd never believe that Jesus, when I first met him, he quoted the Bacchae to me, right? So it's like anything to win people over, which I think is the Pauline church, is the Pauline way to do things, because he's just trying to grow it by any means necessary.
So if we could move on to Jesus' mythological, how would you steelman that? And I know GE is very excited to hear how you steelman this position, because
Yeah.
I think it'll do well for him in the debate.
Yeah, I mean, I was maybe most impressed with the whole, they're not a fan of the Deutero-Pauline epistles, the ones that are not seen as legit, right? So like those, but they also have to be, because like First Timothy straight up says he was ordered killed under Pontius Pilate. So that gives up the game. So you have to be. But saying that the authentic Pauline epistles, there's not a lot of specifics, really. Like this happened, then this happened, right? So you can kind of see how they're like, well, it's just this nebulous thing that what's even going on, right? So I'm kind of sympathetic to it. I can see how you can read it that way, and say, well, maybe there wasn't an historic Jesus at all, right? And then kind of going into the whole like lack of documents for the 1st and 2nd century. Like, well, we don't know, right? There's not a whole lot. So I'm kind of sympathetic to that.
So do you, if you had to be a myth, if like you had this magic box, let's pretend you have this like magic box, and you can ask it questions, and it will tell you whether or not you're mistaken about something, and whether or not something's true. And you ask it, was Jesus historical? And it says no. And it won't give you any more information. But you just knew that Jesus was in some way mythological. What would be the best, or like how would you what type of mythicist, I guess, would you be? Would you be the type of mythicist that says everything that was written in the Gospels was about something that happened in the celestial realm? Or would you be someone that just says it's all bullshit made up by the Catholic Church to take our pennies? Like, what would be the type of mythicist that you would be?
Well, yeah, it'd be tricky. I don't know if like real person with mythology grafted on, that would still be historicist. So I couldn't pick that.
Well, I'll grant you that you can have some guy named Jesus, but let's say like 95% of his stuff is not accurate. Not 99.
Yeah, I mean, and then at that point, how do we gauge the percentages on that? Like, he had like a big church, right, or a big following. Then we're kind of back to straight up historicism again. But so there's like what I think would be cool to be true, and then what I think would actually be true. Like, I like the idea of mystery called origins to Christianity. Like, that's probably my favorite conspiracy version, right? But I don't think it's legit, right? It's really neat to speculate on. So I would maybe choose that one just because it's so cool, right? That we could just kind of say like it's made up like a legend to bring people, to initiate people into our cult. But in terms of something that I would defend as actually being true, yeah, I guess maybe a Jesus that's wildly different, like Zealot Jesus. I don't know if that would count as mythicist.
I haven't read that book. Is that book by who's that book by?
Lena Einhorn. What is it called? The Jesus Mystery.
Yeah, is that what, can you give us the premise of that book quickly?
Yeah, so there's some kind of quirky things going on in Acts, which everybody is going to say, well, yeah, that's so late. But
I actually haven't looked into when is the dating of Acts. I haven't actually looked into that.
I think it's like mid-2nd century. I might be
right. Okay, damn.
I kind of want to look now.
I'll look while you keep explaining.
Oh, sure. So there's this Egyptian that leads a revolt, right, against Rome, and then he runs off into the wilderness, and he's never seen from again. And then there's this interesting part where a Roman soldier comes up to Paul and says, "You're not that Egyptian that led a revolt some time ago, are you?" Right? And he's like, "No, I'm a Roman citizen." And that's the end. But it's such a weird thing to say that kind of makes you wonder what is the author trying to say there, right?
Yeah, it looks like the Acts was written in between 70 and 90 CE by Luke. Looks like.
Well, so I think that might be like a more conservative source. So like
Or 80
people
to
don't.
90, yeah.
So people will generally say that Luke and Acts have the same author, but they don't say that Luke actually wrote Acts. It's just attributed to him, and we have reason to think that Acts is much later than Luke. But
so have you read? So what Jesus mythicist literature have you read? Or I know that you're halfway through the on the historicity of Jesus.
Yeah, I mean that's it. I mean, what I don't know. I'm curious. What else is there? That's all I know of is on the history of Jesus. Oh, there's David Fitzgerald, right? Which his mythicism is a bit different.
I think he
like
yeah,
go ahead.
Doesn't he come to an agnostic position? Like at the end of that, like
I think
agnostic.
he's solidly mythicist, but with this, it's like on the historicity of Jesus is kind of dealing with the. It's dealing with the historical Jesus, right? And what would that would be like, and then kind of taking that off the table. Where David Fitzgerald is kind of showing how these are all myths, and these have been done before, and these are repeated. So this is probably not legit. So it's kind of like our how do we want to say, like the conservative Christian idea of Jesus probably is not the case. But on the history of Jesus is kind of a little bit more harsh, I guess we could say.
Papa Aaron Colson, who's the Pope of Deep Drinks, the highest tier on Patreon. I'm somewhere in the camp of Acts being written around 115 CE. That's interesting. I'd like to learn more about that. Why do you think that, Aaron? If you could type in the chat. And in regards to the historicity, do you have any book recommendations? I know that Bart Ehrman has a book on the historicity of Jesus.
I mean, there's not a lot as far as I know. I know Bart Ehrman, he had, what's his book? But yeah, he has one, and that's all I'm aware. There's some like really old books on the historicity, but they're not terribly they're a little bit conservative in what they're trying to defend. But yeah, it's people don't really touch on the subject because it's just kind of like, come on, like there's no structure, like historical structure behind Jesus. That's just crazy, right? People just kind of don't really respond to mythicism.
So I just posted the links to them all in the chat. Godless Engineer and Caitlin have pointed out that Did Jesus Exist is the book, and it is not peer reviewed. And the On the Historicity of Jesus is. Definitely some fiery comments tonight. I want to remind everyone that that we try to discuss all types of ideas with all types of people in here. I don't advocate for the beliefs or perspectives of anyone. I think sometimes you have to have ideas that that can be. Deep Drinks isn't a safe space. If anyone wants to read the full disclaimer that we have here, You can read it. I'll put it down the bottom. Deep Drinks Podcast strives for deep conversations about deep topics. This can include harmful and dogmatic ideologies discussed responsibly. And you can go to the disclaimer link to read more about that. But in regards to having conversations about whether or not Jesus existed, and everyone seems to be getting fired up about that. This is what we do. Here we have conversations from different perspectives. So, and I mean, everyone needs to go check out the Godless Engineer episode, because he'll give a really good perspective on Jesus mythicism, and the debate will be great, I'm sure. So maybe we should do some shots between each shot of vodka or something between each thing. So if we could, like, with the historical account of the mythological account of Jesus, how do we, like, if you could wrap it up as like this is how you would steelman it, what would you say? Like, if you could give like an elevator pitch to a steelman.
I mean, I would go with your strongest case is the authentic Pauline epistles, that they're just vague. When they talk about the ministry of Jesus, there's not a lot there, right? And I would go with that. I think that's your strongest way to do it. And that's really what On the Historicity of Jesus does. Yeah. And then what a lot of mythicists will say, like, to defeat the historical Jesus, they'll keep on attacking the legendary Jesus, right?
Yeah.
Like, so it's like, oh, come on, there's the hero myth, and he satisfies so many aspects of the hero myth. So how could he be historical? But then we'd have to return to, but we both agreed from the outset that wasn't the Jesus that was historical, right? Mm. But like, I think we just kind of keep on returning to that, like,
yeah.
But
so you're saying it's like both parties are kind of talking about two separate things. Is that what you're kind of saying? Like the mythicists are defending one thing, and the historicists are defending another. Like the historicists aren't saying that like Jesus literally walked on water, et cetera, but they're saying that he's a real person. And the mythicists are saying, well, there's all these, hero. It's like sorry, I got my brain do something funny there. I promise I'm not having a stroke. When I had Dr. Josh on, he mentioned that King David is like likely a historical figure. However, everything's been like heavily spun. So it's like, it's always like David, the reigning king that comes in and stuff. And so are you saying that sometimes the mythicists attack that position, attack the position that, well, this is a hero narrative, so therefore it's all kind of bullshit. And then the historicist says, well, yeah, there's like hero narratives in there because we've kind of we've mythologized, we've kind of made this character legendary, bigger than life and miraculous and all these things, when really likely there's somewhere in between. In the middle is where probably the truth lies, that there probably was some guy, he probably had some profound teachings, he probably had a big following, but he probably didn't do the miracles that are attributed to him. Is that kind of where you would lie, and where you see the argument?
Yeah, and I would be even more generous and say it's more on the bare history side of things, where like even some of the mundane claims, like being born in Bethlehem, right, might not even be the case, right? Mm-hmm. And so, there is a historical kernel to which everything is kind of, all the rumor and speculation has kind of been grafted onto, right? Is the historical claim. But your question was, how would we steelman mythicism, like what's the best mythicist argument, right? I think the epistles. I don't know. I'm trying to be. Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to be fair and come up with what's the best.
Like
probably
Steelman.
the Pauline epistles. That it's just so vague. I would just maybe belabor that. I think is maybe the best strategy to go.
What about if we could steelman the position that the Gospels are talking about a celestial realm rather than like an earthly realm?
I don't think you can, and I don't think that's the case being made. On the historicity of Jesus, that they would just say it's like whole cloth, nothing. You can't do anything with it, right? So, I mean, I would say you likely can, but it's really tricky on how you can kind of pull historicity out of it, right? And because they have Jesus, he's walking around. You can you can touch him, you can eat with him, right? He's clearly on the earth. So if you were to put too much historicity in that, it would just be he's clearly portrayed as walking around being a human being on earth. So it's kind of game over if you accept the historicity of the Gospels, really.
Okay. So all right, well, that's okay. So you don't have like a really solid steelman, but how for the at least for that, but how would you attack mythicism? And I'm sure this part's easy because you're not a mythicist, right? And so how would you what would you say are like some of the, and I'm going to throw some questions at you that I've had from my mythicist friends, but how would you attack Jesus mythicism? And guys, please chill out a little bit in the comments, otherwise I will mute you if you're being disruptive. But so how would you steelman how would you attack the mythicist position?
That kind of, as we're if we're going to do on the historicity of Jesus, and then we're constructing Bayes' theorem, which is essentially it's unlikely that a historical Jesus existed, is what we're saying. That we, in order to do that, we have to accept so many unlikely things, wildly crazy unlikely, to get to that Jesus is unlikely, right? Like I've said, mystery called Origins for Christianity. Nobody thinks that, right? You have to take interpretations of scripture that nobody does, right? Even though they're plausible, I can see these interpretations, right? But at the end of the day, nobody agrees with it, right? And you have to reject Q, and you have to say all these scholars, they don't know what they're talking about. Bart Ehrman, Dennis McDonald, Dr. Litwa, right? They don't know what they're talking about. Clearly they do. They're the most, they're the biggest deals in the world. But you have to say that, right? But so the most prominent scholars in the world think your idea. That'll sound a lot like what's the phrase? Argument from prestige, right? But these are a lot of unlikely positions, right? So the interpolations are right where.
What would you say to someone who says that yes, it's the consensus, at the moment it's consensus scholarship that Jesus was historical, but that kind of it kind of has to be, because otherwise these academic institutions would shut down their these people will be removed from their positions if they said, yes, I believe I'm a mythicists. Like, what do you say to that? There is some form of a bias in the like it's too far out there. You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
for
I'm sympathetic to that. I mean, so like you could have like retired professors that really don't have any skin in the game anymore. That could come out and say I'm a mythicist, but we don't really see that. But I mean, yeah, I mean, especially with like Mike Lacona, he comes and he said, like, what does he say? Walking on water wasn't real, or something like that.
So what do you say?
Like Mike, you mentioned Mike Lacona, right?
Oh, I think he rejected he stated that the people rising from the dead, zombies that weren't really technically zombies, because I think zombies have to be brought to life with voodoo or something, but technically, like the dead rising from the grave and going through Jerusalem, he said that was a legendary account. It wasn't historical, and he lost his job for that. And Godless Engineer, who has just said that Thomas Thompson was fired from the university he founded for espousing mythicism. So yeah, and Michael O'Connor was fired for saying zombied might have not really come out of the graves. Yeah, I mean that's wild to me. Like, it's a university. It's like, wait, so like zombies don't exist, like, and it's just like fired. Like this isn't. I mean, was he working for like AI Answers in Genesis, or was this like a proper universe? Like, that seems wild to me that would happen.
Well, I mean, I would say maybe neither. Like, if like a lot of these statements of faith are just a little bit weird. That like you have to be like a millennialist, or I mean, just like it's just weird. Like, you should be open to everything. Like, that's the purpose of higher education, right? So yeah, I get that criticism where, but I mean that no, I mean I mean, I think that's probably a good point.
There is something that that Bart Ehrman says, that I've heard him say. He says that he doesn't have much. He doesn't put any credence to the mythicist position, and he says, but if you do want to make this like something that's like actually taken seriously, is you need to start getting things peer reviewed and things like that. And I think that's what Richard Carrier is doing, and things like that. But what would you say to someone who said that Paul is our only independent source? So like, and except for the Q document, which is hypothetical. Or maybe actually, could you give us a quick introduction? Give us an introduction of what is Q, for those of us without such big brains. What does Q mean? What is Q? What is Q?
Yeah, so Q is a figure from Star Trek that was into mischief, and he created a source for the Gospels. He went back in time. Then there's the alternative view on Q, which is called the Farrer hypothesis. So Q is German for Quelle, I think, in German means source, because when we're talking about the Bible, we have to be fancy, and use other languages. So there's in the Bible, there's Mark, which is generally believed to be the first gospel. And then there's bits that are common that's not in Mark, but it's in Luke and Matthew. And so we're just like, that's weird that it just seems like copy paste. Right? And we're just like, how did that come to be? That maybe they're using another source, right? And so some people speculate, and I'm sure like the chat will go wild when I say Papias, for all our mythicist friends, that there's the expositions on the sayings of our Lord, right, which is believed to be like an early sayings tradition. And so it's so that's might be the Q source, or there might be several independent Q sources.
Pragmatic crystals
Primarily
too.
Jesus' sayings. That's right. Q is part of the
Yeah.
common material found in the Gospel of Matthew and Luke, and is not in the Gospel of Mark. Yeah. So that's a good way to
Yeah.
summarize it. And then
Thank you, Pragmatic Crystal. I really appreciate that. I'll just read it out for those who might be listening at home. Q source is a hypothetically written collection of primary Jesus sayings. Q is part of the common material found in the Gospels of Matthew and Luke, but not in the Gospel of Mark. Yeah, and we don't have it. So this is something that I notice GE points out a lot, is we don't actually have it. It's hypothetical. It's like, what was it? Someone said something funny about it earlier, and I can't remember. Was it you? Maybe it was you, but someone posted something funny on one of the on maybe YouTube. I'll just try and find it. But yeah, it's hypothetical, right? But is it like, it's hypothetical, but is it still justified? Like, it can be hypothetical and justified, but is it yeah.
Well, I guess it depends on who you ask. Now, so it's the consensus within the scholarship that Q is legit, and maybe we'll find it, right?
Mm.
And so we've seen stuff similar to Q that is not Q, like the Gospel of Thomas, which is another sayings gospel, which is just like stories of conversations or just simple quips that Jesus said.
Yeah.
And my son loves the Lady Gaga song, right? Put your hands above your head, like Jesus said, right? So Lady Gaga has her sayings tradition with Jesus, but which, let's see. So the Gospel of Thomas, and then it would seem that Paul is tapping into some sayings traditions, because he kind of quotes them throughout the epistles sometimes. But so I see it even so. So what people say is that Luke took from Matthew and added his own stuff. Right, and that's how you account for Q. That's like the mythicist position, that there wasn't Q, there wasn't an early sayings gospel, which you kind of have to say that to be a mythicist, because if there's early independent gospel that would date like before Q, oh, look at that, yeah, that it kind of gives up the game for mythicism if to say that Q is legit. And so here, if we're looking at that, so Mark is really tiny, and then we have Luke and Matthew, and then another reason to think that Q is legit is just the stories that occur only in Luke, but not in Matthew. Yep, Lady Gaga is legit. We have that in the chat. Yep, absolutely. And so Luke is like the Good Samaritan that's only in Luke. The foolish rich man who he's going to build up this barn to store all his vast wealth, but then he dies that night. What else? The prodigal son. I think that's only in Luke. So it's kind of like along the same themes of like being hospitable, right? And like humble. And then so Matthew has a lot of the stuff with like the kingdom. So it seems that they're telling their own story, that this is unique to them, and that they're using another source, which is an argument in favor of Q.
Interesting. I have a few more questions around that, but I do want to take a quick moment to shout out a few things. And the first thing is something that I showed you before we started, and I'm so excited about it. Guys, in 2 days, we have the slavery panel coming back to do some to crush some apologetics. And I made what is probably the funniest thing I'll ever make in my life. It is the trailer for panel 2 of the slavery panel. So let's watch it. So yeah, I mean, I love that so much. So
it must have taken forever to choreograph that with them, right?
Yeah,
how many takes did that?
Oh yeah, I got them. I flew them all in, and we got them, But no, it's I thought it was really funny. So we have if those who are interested, we actually produce this really big panel. And you can go to deepdrinks.com/slavery and you can download a PDF. And the PDF is what we'll be going through. It's 28 pages of sources for everything. And it's just wild. So we have the slavery apologetics for those who missed the actual live stream. And we actually categorize each and every one of the arguments into little sections. And then we give let me just zoom out. And then we give like what you might hear when you're talking to someone who says it's not real slavery. It wasn't race-based. It was only temporary, blah, blah, blah. And we're going to be going through this. The panel will be going through this whole list and just pulling apart each one of these categories. And then at the end of the document, we actually have the quotes from each person. This is what Jordan Peterson said. This is what Ben Shapiro, Frank Turek, William Lane Craig, Mike Winger, John McRae, Alan Parr, Paul Copen, and so on. Doug Wilson, J. Warner Wallace, Answers in Genesis, the Southern Baptist Seminary, the HCSB Study Bible. Like, we really did our homework. And then if they delete those videos, because I imagine that they should hang their heads in shame and walk away with their tail between their legs after what these guys did to them last time, we actually have the arguments all stated here, where like the links, so people know when we've cited them if the videos get deleted. So this PDF is available to download. Just go and fill in your details, and it'll get emailed to you. And yeah, so if you guys want to check out that stream, it's going to be in 2 days. It's going to be wild. It's going to be a lot more fun this time, a lot less academic, and a lot more I guess feisty is the word I'll use. And of course, if you want to support this channel, you can join. I've seen a couple of new members. Thank you so much. And you can support us over on Patreon as well. That means a lot. And of course, if you like Elliot's content, he's got his channel Brave New History, which he's got 644 subscribers. Let's see if we can get that number up if you like his content. So with all that said,
so we're gonna postpone the debate until it's at least 4,000, right? So we're gonna sit there, right? And me and John aren't gonna say anything, but
just watch it over and over again. So and of course, like, all you fiery people who are just like getting angry at Elliot, and then there are people who I'm sure will be angry at GE. You can let out your anger and come along to the first Deep Drinks debate, which will be really, really cool. So make sure you come along to that.
Yeah. Can we see some of the fiery comments?
Yeah, I mean, no. Look, honestly, it's not necessary. Let's just save it. Let's just save it for the.
More heat than light. We'll say.
Hey.
It's
essentially when you'll say something, they'll say that's not true, or that's not what mythicists say, and like, I mean, I could sit here arguing with you all day, but I'm trying to conduct an interview as well. So we will jump into some Q&A actually. So it'd be a good idea if you guys have some questions, throw some well-reasoned questions in the chat. Not attacks, not Elliot, you're an idiot, you don't know anything, but like actual questions.
You can say that too, as long as it's super chatted with high money. So
and and check those questions in, and I'll make sure to read them. But I just do want to touch on a few last things before we round up the interview. And we were going to do some slides, but I don't think we have time.
I was going to give John the game, my whole game plan and everything, but whoops, I guess, what can you
do? So what do you think about, so could you touch a little bit more about like the first century mystery cults, and like how we do have some things that have come over from Zoroastrianism, or at least appear to. What do you think about that? Like, what doesn't that lend credence to the idea that Jesus was kind of mythological rather than historical? That we see these ideas developing.
Yes and no. So I did a presentation on my channel about both reasons to believe that Christianity has mystery cult origins, and then also why not. And of course, the why not, kind of putting the cold water on everything, is much less popular than the why, But no, there's a whole bunch of Zoroastrian influence on Christianity. So like hell, demons, which we get a bit of that in Judaism, right? With like the later, we start to see a little bit of demons. The whole savior or Messiah thing. So that is a Zoroastrian concept where a descendant of Zoroaster is going to be the savior, right? So we see that in Islam, the Mahdi is going to be a descendant of Muhammad. And we see that the Messiah is going to be a descendant of David, right? So that theme reoccurs. And then what other themes do we see in Zoroastrianism and Christianity? Demons are a huge thing. That's not really present so much in Judaism. So yeah, I mean, that's legit. And like they did have rituals, just like the Yom Kippur ritual, opening up the Holy of Holies and sprinkling blood on the Ark of the Covenant. That was only for the high priest and only that one day. So you could kind of see maybe there's a mystery cult thing going on there, but really Judaism, Zoroastrianism don't lend themselves well to mystery cults, and that like it was well known what they were doing and what the ritual was, that it wasn't a secret. It was this common knowledge, and the scripture was known by everybody, right? So there wasn't really a secret. So I mean, there was a sect of Christianity, right? The Julian tradition, which is Jeu, has nothing to do with like Judaism. Well, I mean it does, but that's not where the name comes from. It's like it's believed to be the real name of God. Is Jeu. And that is straight up looks a whole lot like a mystery cult, but that's quite late. So we can't really talk about mystery cult origins with it. But hopefully that answers the question.
Have you what are your thoughts on the historicity of Jesus by Richard Carrier?
Well, not to offend anybody, although there's a lot of broad statements which are just not the case, right? Just like all mystery cults, like this is kind of in the beginning, do X. Like the main person of the mystery cult is always a son of God. We know that's not the case. Like with Mithras, I mean, it can be argued like Demeter. I don't know, maybe like we don't know definitively, but like a lot of sweeping statements. And what is it like? I can't come up with that. They're all or often born of a virgin, right? And then there's the whole Isaiah 53, that there's a strong messianic prophecy tradition in Judaism. There's just not with Isaiah 53. It's just not. And they quote the Targum of Jonathan.
That is something that I am interested in talking about, because it's interesting because one of the big things that I kind of learned leaving Christianity is the Jewish perspective of Isaiah 53 is it's not prophesying a Messiah. It's not prophesying Jesus, or it's not prophesying Jesus. It's talking about Israel. But then, and so I thought that was definitely the I thought that was like the case. But yeah, we just had a super chat. Can we get a clear answer if you have read on the historicity of Jesus? Thank you, Aaron Colson.
Yeah, I mean, I've read through it, but not like every word in it. But I mean,
you scanned it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's so. I mean, if I could sum it up, like there's the ascension of Isaiah. They're really into that. Inanna, which is that we get the idea of somebody descending and they're more and more humiliated. That's kind of where Isaiah 53 comes in. And then we talk a lot about like how we can't trust these sources. Then it's all about the Pauline epistles. What else? But yeah,
so GE just commented, you need to show evidence of Isaiah 53 not being a Messiah prophecy. Don't we have like, don't the Jewish the Jews don't accept it as a messianic prophecy, right?
Well,
so
I mean,
why
I don't think
we think it's messianic.
So that's another thing that it's like,
or about Jesus. I can't remember if it
it's
actually
like the
mentions the
shifting
Messiah.
of the burden of proof, really. Like, if that is the pillar of your argument, you need to show that it's true. Not you can't disprove that it's not true, right? Or you can't disprove that it is true. But so yeah, I mean, all you'd have to look at the Targum of Jonathan, which is like a translation where they kind of bring in so apologists will selectively quote from it to make it look like it's a messianic prophecy.
Yeah.
Right. So I mean, this has been done to death. Like, this is kind of like Tovia Singer's career, right? And you can go to any Jewish scholar and they can, or any synagogue, they'll have the Targums on the wall or on the shelves that you can pull it out and read it. You can read Isaiah, just read Isaiah 50 through 55, right? And then it'll be clear to you that they're talking about Israel, not a celestial being that's going to come to earth and die. And then okay, so and here's my other thing with Isaiah 53. Let's seed the point that is messianic, right? They're talking about an earthly guy there. They're talking about like he's going to be like deformed. He's going to be have a hard knock life. He's going to be very human, right? He's going to like they're placing him in like earthly terms, right? He's not like an angel in heaven. So I mean, it's almost like we can construct that superhero pushing a button meme on what are we doing with Isaiah 53. Either way, it's just kind of, are you going to follow it or not, right? And then you would follow it to like earthly, right? If that's your interpretation of it, just like but yeah, that's
because there's the other problem as well. You see that to me, when I read Isaiah 53 from I wear my God glasses, my New Testament glasses, I can see Jesus all through it. However, from what I understand, the suffering servant in the other parts of Isaiah it references Israel. The suffering servant is not Messiah, and also I don't even think it is like it's. I don't even think like technically it is talking about the Messiah, because the Messiah wasn't. Look, I'm talking about this is becoming too Joe Rogan-esque for my liking, where we're just kind of speculating on stuff, or at least from my perspective. But yeah, it just seems to me I was actually taken aback when I did read part of and I haven't gotten all the way through it, and I cut because I only had a week to prepare when GE came on the channel, and so I was kind of speeding through listening to on the historicity, and I was kind of shocked to actually hear that, and I'll be interested to kind of to get G's perspective on that when, I guess, during the debate. We can have a Q&A at the end, and I can kind of bring that up. But yeah, so do you, so you, I guess, I imagine that you don't accept Isaiah 53 as being a like a messianic scripture, or a scripture about Jesus. You see it as Israel.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So just as we kind of wrap up this interview, I wanted to ask you a little bit about your journey. So you mentioned that you were once a Christian. Are you a Christian now?
I mean, I wouldn't describe myself as Christian.
Yeah. Did was there anything that you kind of found in your research that got you to kind of deconstruct your faith, or was it completely separate and not really relevant?
No, absolutely. So I grew up evangelical Christian. So there's the Evangelical Free Church, which is based here in Minnesota in the United States, and very conservative. Like, so it would be the Gospels were written by eyewitnesses, right? And Trinitarian. I mean that's not that unusual, but yeah, very conservative. And then I was just kind of learning apologetics, and I was just kind of surprised as I learned more that it's such weak sauce, right? That nobody thinks that these are written by eyewitnesses. Nobody thinks that. There's no reason to think that. Well, I mean, there is, but there's no good reason to think it.
Yeah.
And what else? I remember.
What about faith, Elliot? You gotta have faith
that
they were written. You gotta have faith that they were written by the right sources, right?
There you go. And then that's another thing. Like, why? Like, it doesn't even say it. Like, and just like these, like when we're talking about inerrancy, and we're like, that's not even a biblical thing, right? Where does it say that the Bible isn't inerrant? Like, why is that a part of our faith?
I actually posed this question to Megan Lewis, right? She's a Christian, and but she's like a fun Christian. She's a very progressive Christian, and she says, and I said, where in the Bible does it say that you're supposed to write down the words of Jesus and put it all into one big canon and then use that to argue about abortion rights? Like, where does it say that in? And she's like, it doesn't. And I'm like, yeah. So, and I was like, isn't it interesting that God, according to the very text that we read, like, God gave us the Holy Spirit. What if it was not God's plan that we were to write down anything? What if God wanted us to only witness with the Holy Spirit? What if it? And then she was like, "Oh, that's a good point." And I was like, "What if it could even be the devil? It could have even been the devil's plan to write the Bible, right? Like, you could make an argument, like, how you could make an argument that it was all the devil's plan, that God wanted us to use the Holy Spirit to witness to people. It even says it clear as day in the Bible. The Holy Spirit is the inner witness." So it's like, yeah, I don't know. Like, I've always pondered that, but then people will come back with the verse in Revelations, right, and pretend that talks about everything, not a jot or tittle will be changed or something like that, but they kind of project that back onto the whole Bible, the New Testament and Old Testament.
Yeah. What's the irony of that is Revelation was among the last books to be added to the canon. And so it's kind of funny to say, if anybody adds or subtracts from this book, like, that's what you're doing when you add Revelation to the canon.
And then this is a bit of a, and then that didn't really work very well, and Christianity was like all divided and stuff. And then 600 years later, Muhammad's like, you know what, I'm going to write something that's like the final perfect, I'm going to make it very clear that nothing can ever be added to this, nothing. And then we have Islam. It's like the last testament. That's just a joke, but yeah, you can see how the formulation of that thought, right, in Near Eastern religions, where it's like, it's like we have the Old Testament, and then Jesus comes. It's like, okay, now this is it. This is like the final. The end's coming. This is the final thing. And then with Islam, the same thing. This cannot be changed. This is exactly what God said. Like it's not even. It's word for word. God's spoke in Arabic. Like So yeah. So it's interesting. You see that kind of develop, and it's like if we just have something that can't be changed, everything will be fine. But then obviously society changes, and then yeah. Okay, so I've got some questions for you, and if someone's got some questions, tag me in the chat. But these are questions I ask a lot of people, but I'm going to throw in a new one. What would it take for you to accept mythicism?
That's a good question. I guess a convincing argument, which I mean that's cheating to say, but because that's like kind of circular.
It's like when someone says like God did it for reasons sufficient to him. It's like, okay.
I'd have to be. So I mean, I don't think I'd be convinced by this, cosmic sperm bank, Jesus existing in a higher plane thing on different levels of heaven. I don't know, early hostile testimony saying he's made up. Like, Paul, you're crazy. Like, like maybe something like that. I don't know. Yeah. Like, what would be a good, I mean, like, you'd have to overcome significant, like, with First Thessalonian, right? Chapter 1 and 2, like, where they're talking about the whole thing about Jesus' death. Have to come with something quite convincing about how that's interpolated. Where from what's in the history of Jesus is kind of weak sauce to me. And the overwhelming scholarly opinion is that it's not interpolated. But I don't know, like that would, I mean, if you kind of get rid of every reference in the Pauline epistles, I mean, that would be a good argument.
Everyone knows that atheists become atheists because they love to sin. What was the sin you left your faith for?
Well, actually, it's the opposite way around. I mean, a lot of people think that so people join Christianity because they don't want to be accountable to their sin. So they have Jesus die for them. So if you believe that you have Jesus dying for your sins, that's because you don't want to be accountable to your sins. But I want to be accountable to my sins. So I'll just say that's okay. Like I can do it. Right. No, I'm just joking. What's my favorite sin? I don't believe in sin. Like, so I'm a little bit sympathetic to Gnosticism, where I believe like in virtue and vice, not sin per se.
Trent's favorite sin is coffee, and because he's
is that a sin? I don't know.
Yeah, ex-Mormon. Yeah, so it definitely was.
Well, that's another thing with the whole LDS thing, that strong drink in the Word of Wisdom, that was hard liquor. Like this whole new interpretation that's coffee and tea, that's made up. Joseph Smith Jr., he loved tea. So
okay. Well,
I don't know. So much pot.
Yeah, so what would be your sin of choice?
Well, so like I've already said I don't believe in sin, but
yeah, but like hypothetically.
I don't know. What are some sins?
Lust, lying, stealing, I guess drinking too much alcohol, not having faith is a sin, like questioning. What
would be the name of that sin?
I don't know, because you could say like you're doubting Thomas or something, right? Like it could also be that, like, oh, I'm just being doubting Thomas.
Let's see. What is my favorite sin?
Meredith's favorite sin is coveting her neighbor's slaves. Her neighbor's slaves. So.
Oh yeah, coveting your neighbor's. But it's not slaves. It's coveting your neighbor's wife, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just, I think she's making a joke because it's property. Coveting your neighbor's, like, coveting your neighbor's property, and like, so, yeah. I don't think that she was saying that. Meredith was saying that it was like her favorite one, but she just mentioned it.
Got it. Oh, geez, yeah. I wish I could come up with something good. What's a good sin that I enjoy?
If you don't have one, that's
how about vengeance? That's maybe the
awesome. Vengeance is mine, says Elliot. Okay, and here's a question I like to ask, and I think it's and it might be interesting because you've it sounds like you've done some research. What is the most plausibly true religion that you don't believe in?
So let's see. So to get a plausible religion, you need like as few claims as possible, right? Because like the more claims, the more improbable it becomes. So you'd have to have like a bare bones religion. I would say, like, kind of like I said, I like Gnosticism in that it avoids like the problem of evil, like knowing how everything would turn out. Like they don't even say creation, right? It's emanation, and there's no claims about God. That it's unknowable. You just did, like, that's where it ends. It's unknowable. And like, did the monad, did it know how all this would turn out? We don't know, right? And it's all emanated. And why do bad things happen? Well, because we're farther away from the monad, and then you have to get closer. You have to escape all this and get back. So I think that's probably the most like intellectual religion when it was trying to overcome all these ideas. So that's what I would maybe go along with. And it kind of, I mean, all people say this, apologists. So if I'm a Gnostic apologist, well, it corresponds with science, right? With the Big Bang, that it all just kind of started existing, right? And we'll maybe know nothing about how it existed. So I would just say probably Gnosticism.
Interesting. I think that you're the first person who's chosen that. A lot of people take the easy answer. What I would say is Buddhism, because you can have a Buddhism without a god.
Yeah, I was thinking about Buddhism. Yeah.
It is interesting to think about. Well, I'm super excited for this debate because everyone seems pissed off in the chat. So it's gonna be really interesting. It's obviously getting people quite worked up. So come along to the debate. Did Jesus exist historically? But before then, we have the amazing Slavery #2 panel, where we're going to be doing deep dive into the apologetics and pulling it apart. Before we show the trailer for that again, as we end out the show, is there anything else you wanted to kind of mention, Elliot, or shout out anything that you're currently doing, or you got a new video you're working on?
Yeah, we're kind of doing a lot of stuff. Let's see. This Sunday we'll be talking about Abraxas, this Gnostic deity. If you're familiar with it, pretty interesting. He is the head of the rooster. Got some legs that are serpent legs. So we're doing that. Let's see. I'm going to start a series on Mithraism, on its origins, and yeah, it'll be neat. So yeah, check out my channel if you like, and yeah, we're going to take on a few projects.
Awesome. Well, I'm super excited to see where your channel kind of goes. Super excited for the debate. And thanks for coming out, everyone. It's been really awesome to do a stream at this time of day. I hope it's not too late for everyone. And I'll see everyone in a couple of days for the slavery panel. And we're going to end on that trailer. Thanks for coming out, guys. Bye.